and welcome to this episode of the AI-Driven Enterprise Podcast. I'm your host, Arvind Rajan, co-founder and CEO of Astute Business Solutions. The AI-Driven Enterprise Podcast is one that delivers real insights in conversations with business leaders that are adopting AI at scale in their organizations. AI headlines are everywhere, but enterprise results are far and few in between. This podcast cuts through the noise with honest conversations about what it truly takes to deploy AI at scale. Each episode features real conversations on how enterprises are adopting AI across finance, IT, and operations. We discuss specific use cases that are suitable for AI. We discuss how AI is implemented responsibly and what it takes to scale in a rapidly evolving AI landscape. I'm happy to welcome Sitaaraam Tennati as my guest today. Sitaaraam is the Executive Director of Finance at Mizuho Financial Corporation, a major Japanese financial institution and one of the largest banking groups offering services in banking, securities, and asset management. Sitaaraam is a senior finance leader with over 25 years of experience across global banking, audit, and risk management. In his role as Executive Director at Mizuho, he oversees financial control and reporting across corporate and investment banking. Sitaaraam has deep expertise in IFRS, US GAAP reporting, financial governance, and regulatory frameworks, and he has experience leading strategic finance transformation initiatives, including automation and process redesign. Sitaaraam's background includes global banks, including RBS, JP Morgan, HSBC, and Bank of America. He has a strong record in working with boards, audit committees, and C-suite stakeholders. And his career started with Big Four consulting and financial controls architecture. I'm excited to have Sitaaraam Tennati as my guest on the podcast today. Welcome, Sitaaraam. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thanks, Arvind. How are you?
Excellent. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Sitaaraam, why don't you share a little bit about your background and experience for our audience?
Yeah, sure. So I am a chartered accountant by background, Arvind. So I qualified a long time ago now. Can't remember exactly. Must be late 90s. So yeah, almost 30 years now. I currently manage the financial control and the management reporting functions at Mizuho, which is a global investment bank. So I am based out of their office in London. I've been here for the last 8+ years, and I've been in investment banking finance for over 20 years now. So I've worked at JP Morgan before, Royal Bank of Scotland, HSBC, and now Mizuho. Before I moved to investment banking, I was with KPMG for a while in India. So yeah, I've got about 25+ years of experience.
Excellent. So strong background in finance, in auditing and controls, and obviously reporting, which is a very important aspect of finance. Glad to have you on this podcast. So Sitaaraam, AI is in the headlines. Everywhere you look, people are talking about AI. In fact, it's not just the personal aspect of AI that we're seeing or the consumerization of AI, but also a lot of talk and maybe a lot of hype also about AI in the enterprise, right? What the world is going to be like, how AI is disrupting everything. You have a unique vantage point in the finance world, in corporate finance and reporting and governance. What are your thoughts on AI improving the accuracy and speed of financial reporting within large companies like the one you're working for?
It's a good question. And I must admit, I've got some mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, as you say, there's a lot of hype about AI. I was talking to some colleagues recently, and some of them had attended a conference where AI was center stage. But I must admit, I'm a bit nervous, and maybe that's my background as an auditor. So I always tend to be a bit more circumspect about things. I think for me, AI brings opportunities, definitely. But I think there's a lot of challenges that need to also be dealt with. So I'm not saying they are necessarily showstoppers, but I think anyone who wants to adopt AI needs to do so with their eyes wide open. And it's important that there are certain guardrails that are put in place before you want to go and adopt AI, in my view.
That's an excellent stance, actually. I agree with that, Sitaram, because as I've spoken to other finance leaders and as we've implemented some AI automation solutions specifically for finance and for procurement, we find that level of skepticism is quite healthy for AI because AI has the potential to do a lot of good, but if it's not governed, it can also do some damage. And in the world of finance, we know accuracy matters a lot. When we're thinking about content creation or document processing, a word or paragraph here and there can be off, but when you want to work with finance, numbers matter. So everything has to be just right. You cannot have even the slightest of error. So I think that's healthy to have those concerns. But you brought up something that's really important, which is the word guardrail. And this is something that's being talked about a lot in the context of AI. So tell me a little bit more about how you might want to put some guardrails around finance when you consider adopting AI.
I think for me, the first and foremost aspect to deal with before we even talk about AI would be your data. I think a lot of people I've spoken to seem to think AI can come in and change their world, but AI is only so good as the data it's relying on. I know I'm using a very silly example here, but every time I ask Copilot or Gemini or whatever to give me something about certain accounting standards or something, it confidently tells me something, even though it's a matter of judgment. And the tone and manner in which the response comes back is a bit shocking because normally you want to be sure about everything. You want to be doubly sure about everything. So I think for me, the first starting point would be how good is your data? How good is the data that your AI model is using? Because if your data is not right, if you don't have proper data lineage, then the basis on which your AI model is coming to conclusions or inferences is going to be skewed. So I think for me, that would be my first starting point. So look at your data, make sure your data is clean, you're able to stand by it. And then the second thing I would say is make sure you have enough data, because the other challenge I think needs to be recognized is sometimes your data could have elements that might skew your results. For example, if it's got data from a certain period of time. So good example, COVID, when the markets were completely going one way and you use a very limited data set for your AI inference model to derive conclusions, it's going to come up with something that is just not going to work in another scenario. So I think that's where I would start. I think for me, data governance would be a key component of how you start your AI model or AI program.
I think that's an excellent point. If I were to think back on all the guests I've had on my podcast so far, I think almost everyone has emphasized that point because I think that's supremely important in the case of AI. Because AI does require data as the first input. And to your point, if we do not give it the right amount of data, the right quality of data, then it's going to understand that data and assume that is the source of truth. And it's going to then interpret that and summarize that and inference from that and create other data sets, which may be misleading. And you're right, COVID happened. We all wish it did not, but it was a blip in the history of data, right? When we think about it. And oftentimes we want to discard that period of information or have specific rules around how that should be interpreted and maybe give it some context so that AI understands that was not normal and that has to be treated slightly differently. So that's an excellent starting point. It reminds me of something that Rob Dixon, my previous guest on the podcast, said. Over the years, digital literacy has become the foundation of careers, right? So we go from our education into the real world. All of us are expected to have digital literacy, computer skills with office productivity applications and various other software tools. Now in this new world, I think there are two more things that have to be added to that to be successful in this new world with AI. One is data literacy, which means having a really good understanding of all the data that your organization generates, the sources of data, the data flows, the data lineage, as you called it. And then on top of that, you need some AI literacy to understand how does AI actually process the data? What does it do with the data? How does it manipulate the data? Without those three, I don't think customers can be very successful in implementing AI.
Absolutely true. I think the last point you made about how do you interrogate the AI model? How do you validate what the AI model is telling you? I think that's also very important because I know I'm talking 20 years back now, but used to have this concept of auditing through the computer and auditing around the computer. How do you deal with a computer-based output? And at the moment, AI is a black box. So everyone takes the output, but no one is really clear how that output has been generated. And I think especially in a finance or a reporting type function, it is very important that you're able to explain how you got to what you got to.
Exactly.
And if your AI cannot do that, it just gives you an output, but you're not able to substantiate or validate how you got to that number, then that's a problem. And your regulators are not going to buy that.
Yeah. Very true. One positive that I see on that front is that we are already implementing some solutions where we are asking AI to explain how it arrived at a recommendation or a particular analysis or how it created a data set. So build a narrative around that and then also substantiate that with specific steps that it took to calculate that. So in other words, we have to audit what AI is doing, not just accept the outcome that AI produces. And one of the ways in which we're doing that is if you're using one model and feeding it your data set and asking it to do certain things to produce an outcome, we can have another model that acts as an auditor or as a judge or as an overseer of that first model, so that you have two independent entities, one fact checking the other, so to speak. This is obviously a fast moving space. A lot of things are evolving. The tooling and the underlying platforms are also changing, and they're becoming better every day, every week. Sometimes it's crazy when you look at the pace of change and pace of innovation, it's hard to keep up. But good things are happening, and better solutions and frameworks are coming up as a result of that. Now, Sitaram, finance as an industry has always been surrounded by a lot of regulation, right? There's always been the need for compliance and so on and so forth. If you were to just wear your CPA hat and think about the role that you're in, you're working on finance transformation, financial reporting, you're already working under all of these compliances and regulatory requirements. Do you think there could be a reason why AI would not play nicely with those controls that you have in place today?
I want to feel slightly optimistic here. I do think AI has a role to play. And I think overall, AI is a good thing. For example, we talked about data lineage. If anything, I would say AI has helped spotlight the challenges that businesses have always had with data. So data lineage is not a new problem. It's always been there, right? So if anything, the advent of AI has probably brought that into the forefront. So that's a good thing, right? So in that sense, I see AI as helping move things forward and helping improve the efficiency and the speed with which things are done. But I think it's also equally important that we recognize the limits of AI. So I wouldn't necessarily think AI is going to replace the financial controller of tomorrow. So everyone talks about what's going to happen with everyone's jobs. Is AI going to take over all my jobs tomorrow? I don't think so. I think AI will definitely automate a lot of things. It will speeden up a lot of things. But I think the future job of someone tomorrow in finance is going to be, as you rightly said, someone who understands AI, understands how to use AI in the right way, understands how to interrogate and have the right governance around AI, and be able to interpret and use the results and outputs from an AI model. So I think it's about upskilling yourself as a financial controller, as a CPA, to see how you can use AI in the modern context.
Yeah, that's a great point, because that's something that we're finding in our conversations with customers. Is there is obviously a gap. This is quite new in the market. AI literacy is not widespread. So customers have to put in the effort. Sometimes it's self-training, sometimes it's corporate training, but there has to be both that self-driven approach as well as a programmatic approach to train your employees so that they can work with the next generation of tools and software. And whether we like it or not, these finance applications and systems that we are all used to in our environments today, they're all being infused with AI in the next releases. So before you know it, you're going to be working on the next generation of software with these AI capabilities. So the sooner we learn how to use them and how to take advantage of them to make our lives better in the case of finance or procurement or whatever the domain may be, I think everyone will be better off. I also feel that there are some proverbial low-hanging fruit in the sense that reporting is been complex, especially for large companies, many moving parts, many data sources and inputs, a lot of data cleanup before a final report is produced. So we still have to address the data problem, but the report writing itself, AI is able to simplify it, because now AI allows you to have a conversational interface with your data, and it can perform amazingly complex tasks. If you ask it to go find information that has to be connected from 3 or 4 different sources and matched up, and then an output has to be produced, it can do that quite well. Again, as long as the data input is good, it's clean, and it's verifiable. But the reporting aspect and then the self-service aspect of it, because when you think about financial reporting, there are various levels of people in the organization, and the type of reporting also changes based on whom you're reporting to. So the executive level management wants to see a certain style of report. One level below, they want to see more detail, and so on and so forth. AI allows that to be largely simplified and accelerated in some ways. Again, not a perfect world, but it can certainly actually drive some improvement in efficiencies in those areas.
Absolutely, I agree. And I think a lot of the mundane stuff can be easily simplified using AI. And I think this is where, as a controller, your role evolves. So you are not producing things anymore. You are interpreting and getting onto the more judgmental aspects of the role, which is a good thing, because I'll be honest and I'll admit that 70-80% of my time I'm spending just manipulating data. So I would like to spend more time actually being able to value add and provide that judgmental angle to things. But the data and the way the processes are constructed at the moment simply doesn't allow me that freedom.
Yeah, I think that's true of a lot of people today. I'm guilty of that too. I spend a lot of time doing the actual tasks rather than being able to step back and figure out, okay, is there a pattern in some of these things and can I optimize it? And sometimes it's the software tool, sometimes it's the business process, but we could all look for efficiencies in that. Sitaram, when we were talking about this last week, leading up to this podcast, you mentioned that you're leading a transformation process currently, right? So as you go through that transformation and you look ahead at the outcome and the next generation of solutions that you would be deploying when the transformation is successful, what role do you see AI playing at that stage? Do you see a follow-on project? We're saying once we're done with our transformation initiative, we think that we might be able to be in a place where we could take on some AI initiatives?
I would say so, yes. Without naming names, we are upgrading our ERP system and moving to a cloud-based solution. So there's already AI inbuilt into that solution, but there's a separate conversation about how do we onboard that and embed that into our processes, because we need to streamline our processes to benefit from that. But yes, I do think that once our transformation journey is complete in the next couple of years or so, we should be in a good position to take on and start using AI in a much more confident and much better fashion, which is what I'm certainly looking forward to, because the whole idea of the transformation was for us to simplify and streamline processes.
Yeah, it does. Any transformation does bring with it a certain change management rigor and some discipline that you to enforce around standardizing business processes. That's par for the course. That's great. I wish you all the best on that transformation project.
Thank you.
I hope to hear from you on what AI initiatives you might include within that transformation project, if the platform already gives you those capabilities, or what are something that you might be thinking of once you are done with this transformation project. As a parting note, Sitaram, given your expertise in finance, your role now and the ones that you've had before, what are some of the things that you might want other peers in the industry who work in similar roles as you to take away from this conversation and your experience and some of the transformation projects that you're currently leading? How can they take away something from that and prepare for what's coming down the road with AI?
I think for me, a couple of things. A, we talked about data lineage. So make sure you've got good data. Without good data, I wouldn't even consider going down the AI transformation route. So I think that's number one. And then number two, it's important to be clear about what sort of impact AI is going to have on your function. And again, there's a lot of scaremongering going on at the moment about what AI will do to roles in finance and so on. I think for me, what is important is how do you adapt yourself to AI? So how do you broaden your skill sets and your role? A shift in mindset is required in order to embrace what AI can bring, at the same time be cognizant of the challenges it has got and how to overcome them.
Very well put. Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I hope to have you back in one of our future podcasts when you are closer to finishing up your transformation initiative.
Thank you, Arvind. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Hello.